Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Brian, and like a lot of you, I've been really looking forward to the launch of the Switch 2. And also like a lot of you, I've had a bit of sticker shock. But fortunately, there's an easy way for any Switch owner to get some instant cash towards the Switch 2. You trade it in. GameStop and other third-party retailers have long offered a set cash value when you trade in an old console when buying a new one, and the Switch 2 launch is no different. But, as tempting as it is to trade in my Switch when buying the Switch 2, I'm not going to. And I don't think you should either. Let me tell you why in today's episode of Worth the Wait. Before I get into the reasons not to trade in the Switch 1 when buying the Switch 2, let's talk about why you would want to trade it in the first place. Obviously, the main reason is money. The Switch 2 is pricey, there's no doubt about it. At $450, that is 50% more than the Switch was at launch. Thankfully, as of filming this video, Nintendo has announced that they are going to stick with the original announced price of $450, $500 if you buy the Mario Kart bundle. They did, however, say that all the accessory prices have gone up, and with the state of the world today, who knows if all of those prices are going to stay where they are or if they're going to go up in the future, including the console. There's just no way to know. So obviously, every dollar you can get off that total price, the better. GameStop has already announced their trade-in offer, which currently stands at up to $175 when trading in the Switch 1 for the Switch 2. And by up to, they mean $175 for the Switch OLED, $125 for the Switch V1 or V2, which just means any non-OLED Switch, and $100 for the Switch Lite. And to me, those are pretty good values. Could you make more if you sold it yourself to someone directly? Of course. That will always be the case when you trade in a product to a third-party reseller, since they need to be able to sell it for more than they paid you for it to profit on their end. But it's not just a net loss to you in terms of what you would have made. There are some genuine perks to trading in at a store versus selling it yourself online. One, a guaranteed value. You don't have to worry about eBay bidding or negotiating on Facebook Marketplace. The values they've announced are the values you'll get, so long as the device is in good working order. Two, a guaranteed sale. There's always the chance that you won't find a buyer for something you post online, or the chance that it'll take a long time. Unless your Switch is broken or you don't otherwise meet the requirements, you will for sure know you will be getting the full trade-in price before you get the Switch 2, which lets you budget accordingly. And three, convenience. No pictures, no posting online, no dealing with interested buyers who just ghost you. You just bring it into the store, they make sure it works, and you're good to go. Typically, they'll even migrate any data from your old device onto the new one so you don't have to. Not only is that a great service you'd be getting for free, it's something that wouldn't even be possible if you sold it yourself online before getting the new device. Outside of money, there are other very valid reasons to trade it in. Maybe you just don't want two screens at home for your kids to play with. Maybe you don't have the space and want less clutter. Or you are concerned that it is about to stop working, so you'd rather get rid of it before it becomes e-waste and let them refurbish it and give it a new life. I personally think trading in old devices for new ones is great. I've done it a bunch of times for all kinds of tech, certainly phones I've traded in. I typically would recommend it, especially if you have a particularly old device that they are offering a good deal on. But for the Switch specifically, there are a handful of reasons I would say make this a device you would not want to trade in. And the biggest reason is backwards compatibility. By which I mean the ability for the Switch 2 to play Switch 1 games or use Switch 1 accessories. Now, I am sure a lot of you are saying, Brian, that's a non-issue. Nintendo has been saying the Switch 2 will be backwards compatible for the last 6 months. And that is true. They have said that the Switch 2 will feature backwards compatibility. But they have explicitly said that that isn't for 100% of games. Back in November, Nintendo first announced that the Switch 2 would have backwards compatibility. But since the full reveal on April 2nd, we've learned a lot more about the specifics of the Switch 2, including backwards compatibility. Unfortunately, it will not include every game and every accessory for the Switch, at least at launch. The good news is the first-party games made by Nintendo and their developers directly, are pretty much all good to go. I think there's only one game that doesn't run on the Switch 2, some Labo VR game, and it only doesn't work because the Switch 2 is physically much larger than its predecessor, so much so that it doesn't fit into the cardboard VR headset. Third-party games, on the other hand, are a different story. These are the games built for the Switch by partner companies other than Nintendo directly. There are, according to Nintendo, 122 Nintendo games and over 15,000 partner games. I would guess that if you or your kids have had a Switch for even a small portion of the 8 years the Switch has been out, you've bought at least some of these partner games. Now, on their website, they confirm that every one of the Nintendo games for the Switch work without issue, or, and this is an important disclaimer, with issues they plan to address. But the vast majority of games from their partners are still in the testing phase. Here in this chart, you can see the Nintendo games are all good to go with the one sliver of red for the VR Labo. But for partner games, only this top 20 to 22% are labeled as no issue. The next, 75% are listed as, quote, games can be started, further tests in progress. Then all the way down at the bottom, they got the slivers of, quote, game is playable with issues in certain parts of the game, and, quote, issues were found during startup. And to be clear, that last one means the game might not start up at all. We can't know specifically what the problems are, but if it has startup issues, that isn't good. You might as well assume that that game won't be available until it gets off this list. But I can hear you saying, those are probably just some rando indie games, little $2 games nobody cares about. There's no way there's going to be big titles on that list. First of all, there are some $2 indie games that plenty of people love. Second, there's no guessing needed. They've got lists of the games that currently have issues. Keep in mind, these lists are subject to change over time. Maybe the developer will create a software patch that fixes a game. Maybe Nintendo will find some operating system update that clears up the major issue. Or maybe the developer will just make a whole new Switch 2 version entirely. But all we can do right now is look at the lists as they stand at this moment. And right now, there are some big games that you may have spent real money on that currently have major issues on the Switch 2. Big enough issues that they would put them on this list. Just scrolling through the issues on startup list, the bad list, the list you don't want a game to be on, I'm seeing Dead by Daylight, Doom Eternal, NBA 2K25 and 2K18, Rocket League? Rocket League is a huge game. You could play it on your Switch. Your kids could be playing it on their Switch all the time. And as of right now, that doesn't work on the Switch 2. Warframe's on here. Wolfenstein 2 is on here. These are some big games. Games that may not start up at all on launch day. Looking at the startup but in-game issues list is shorter, but still, Alan Wake, Alien Isolation, Factorio, Fall Guys, Hot Wheels Unleashed, there's some good games on here. The craziest was Fortnite. Fortnite was on this list. They have since moved it over to this third list, Switch games with issues that plan to be addressed list, but still, the only solution was to make a Switch 2 specific version of Fortnite. Not every developer has the money to do that or the desire to do that. It may just not be worth their time to make a Switch 2 exclusive version of a game that they sold for the Switch. But could all of these issues be fixed? Absolutely. I could not tell you what Nintendo or their partners are going to be able to accomplish, but I can tell you that these are their current known issues, and this list could grow or shrink at any time. What's particularly interesting with the Switch 2 is it has some of the hardware from the Switch 1. So when somebody asked Nintendo, does the Switch 2 accomplish backwards compatibility through hardware or software emulation, Nintendo answered, both. So that means they are using cutting-edge techniques to mix some of the Switch 1's hardware with enough of the Switch 2 processing power to create a Frankenstein of backwards compatibility. I think it is technologically super cool. But as a customer and someone with a Switch upon which I have several of the games currently listed as having startup issues, I cannot justify trading in my current Switch when I don't know if or when I'll be able to play all of the games that I've paid for. And as much as I think that this is an issue that should make everyone think twice before trading in their Switch, there are several other very compelling reasons to hold on to it as well. For one thing, they've introduced some new ways to share your Switch games between systems, whether it is sharing a game that only one of you own for local multiplayer, or the new digital cartridges system that lets you lend out and share games between systems, which makes it easier than ever to own multiple Switches in one home. Having a second Switch for two-player games or just to share games with another member of the family is great. Back in 2020, roughly 20% of Switch console sales went to households that already owned a Switch. People obviously found value in having multiple consoles, and I think a lot more people would as they add a Switch 2 to their homes. Speaking of buying two, with the price of the Switch 2 and its accessories as they are, how soon do you really think you'll be buying a second Switch 2? Maybe when it comes out with an OLED, maybe if there's a Pro version, I don't know. But my guess is most of us won't be buying a second Switch 2 anytime soon. Keeping your Switch 1 is by far the most cost-effective way to have multiple players play on different Switches in your house. You could also repurpose the Switch in interesting ways. Maybe leave it permanently docked in a room so there's always something to play. Maybe use it as part of a DIY arcade cabinet. I've seen people do that with the Steam Deck. With all the retro games in the Nintendo Switch Online library, that could be a ton of fun. Plus, you could still hop into Animal Crossing or Tears of the Kingdom. It's a great mix of retro and modern, though soon enough Switch 1 games are going to be seen as retro and we're just going to feel older and older. Which actually brings me to my final reason to keep it. Nostalgia. I have a lot of good memories tied to my Switch, just as I do to all the systems I've had over the years. You may find that you'll want to go back and revisit your Switch someday, or maybe your kids go off to college, they'll take their Switch 2, and they'll be able to come home and have the Switch 1 waiting, still in the case they had when they were a kid that they brought on family trips with the controllers you guys used together. I think there's magic to playing an old system. And I know it's not the number one reason for most people, and perhaps nostalgia isn't worth $175, but someday you may feel differently. Hopefully somewhere in here you found something to think about, and if you still feel like you want to trade it in, by all means go for it. I certainly won't judge you. I know $450 is a ton of money, and if you can't afford to spend that amount of money without the trade-in, that's totally understandable. But I think you would be better served holding onto your Switch and just waiting until you've saved up the rest. There's no crazy rush to buy the Switch 2 on launch day. Most of the games won't be out on launch day. Even Donkey Kong Bonanza doesn't come out in the first month. Just wait and save and enjoy your Switch. I think you'll be happy you did. Parents, maybe wait until the holidays. Buy Christmas. There's going to be so many must-play games, it'll be a no-brainer to get a Switch 2. But in June, other than Mario Kart and some updated versions of Zelda, there's nothing that's really going to make you feel like you're missing out on everything if you just wait a little bit until you can afford it, which is what I would recommend to anyone buying any technology. Only buy it when you can afford it. Let me know in the comments if you found this useful. It's a big purchase, and I always appreciate hearing other people's perspectives before I buy something big, so I hope this was helpful for you. If you want to see more videos like this one, make sure you give me a like and a subscribe. It helps me out a ton. Definitely go check out my react video to the Switch reveal from a few weeks back. And if you're into gaming, my Late to the Game series has me going back through retro games I've missed over the years. Currently, Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2 are up. But that'll do it for this one. Until next time, peace.